So guys, recently I was invited to partake in a budget build. We are taking Power Wheels and turning them into basically go-karts. Like, what's the fastest Power Wheel you can make with a $200 budget? Now, there are some rules and regulations that we went over yesterday as a group, and I will tell you those kind of as we go along. But here's what you need to know. So I've had a Power Wheel when I was a kid, and I mean like an 8-year-old kid. Like this thing, I looked it up, and this was made in the late 80s, early 90s. So she's got some miles on her. I actually got it used when I was a kid. I'm giving you the reveal right now. The plan was I was going to use that and then make my go-kart Power Wheel thing out of that. Now I'm saying was because then, as you can see here, is I was tinkering with it, and I got it moving with a drill battery. Yep, go ahead. My kids won't give it back to me now. They won't let me play with it. So what we did is we went on the old interwebs, and I've got myself a new one. Let's take a look at that bad boy. Alright guys, so this is the one that I have now. Now it may look small, but I'm telling you it's actually 3 inches wider than my old one. Alright, so let me tell you who I'm battling. So we have my buddy Ben, who I've battled in the past with. I've mentioned him numerous times. We have him and his son, and then we have his son-in-law. Not his son's son-in-law, but Ben's son. You get it. So there's the playing field. There's 4 of us. Now let me give you a background that I know of on these 4 men. So my buddy Ben has probably been tinkering around and doing this kind of stuff probably about as long as I've been alive. And that's not calling him old, that's calling him experienced, okay? And now you got his son, who was a combat engineer for the military. And then you got his son-in-law, who his profession is a machine builder. And then you got me, who is a woodworker. So what I'm saying right now is don't expect this channel to bring a W home, but expect me to have a lot of fun doing it. So with that being said, let's get dusty. Okay, so we've gotten the Power Wheel all stripped down to nothing but a body, and now we need to start with, you know, building it back up. We need tires, we need brakes, we need a frame, we need a motor, and we have a $200 budget. Now that seems like it's going to be pretty hard to do, but hold on. So, I just picked this up for $100. Now that is half of my budget. But it's got brakes, it's got wheels, it's a frame, it's got steering controls. All it really needs is a motor. So we're not going to use the motor on this. So now the next step is we got to strip this down and see what we're working with. Alright, so I have everything torn out. I tore the motor out of here, all the electrical stuff off, all the stuff that I wasn't going to need. Like I said, when I got the bike, or the quad, he said I just needed the top end rebuilt, and maybe it did, I don't know, but I'll say just about every one of the wires was butt connected back together. Like somebody had told in here, there's oil around where I don't think there should have been oil. And then I think I'm missing the bearing in this front thing. I think it's the neck bearing it's called. And then some other stuff that I'm just noticing. So I'm going to go through, and now that everything's stripped out, I'm going to chop all these little brackets off that I won't be needing anymore and flush it out and start fresh. So if I want to keep the same wheelbase as the Power Wheel, I need to actually cut 10 inches and shrink the frame 10 inches. I'm not going to do that, but I do think I'm going to end up having to shrink the frame a bit. But this right here is going to be the new power plant for it. It's a Briggs & Stratton 5.5 horse. I used to have it on my mini bike. My mini bike would go about 34 with me on there. I'd also had a big sprocket on the back. I think I can get a little more out of it. I was also I was also smaller at the time. But I think this, if I can get this up and running, because last I knew it wasn't running, we'll stick this in here, and I want to slide the motor as far forward as I can. I don't know. So we're gonna see. I gotta see if I can even fit this in here with what modifications I'm gonna have to make. Well, it'll fit in there. All right. So after getting this thing all torn apart, I got the motor inside there. I still have to do, I'm gonna have a problem with probably the muffler. The big issue I'm seeing right now, and the biggest modification I'll have to do, is the back axle has the sprocket over here compared to the motor, which has it over here. So I'll end up having to flip the axle, which means that the shock is going to have to also, I'm going to cut the shock, put the shock on the other side. Not a big deal. That should be okay. It looks like I can shrink the frame about 6.5 inches in. Body looks like it might be slightly of an issue. The exhaust might be an issue where it's at. I'm probably gonna have to make a custom exhaust pipe on that. The first thing I think I need to do is I need to get this motor actually running to make sure this is the motor that I'm going to use. Because I've had it sitting around for a while. I think the carb pieces will be clean. I'm going to pull it off, get the motor up and running, and then we will start chopping and everything else. You see this face? You see how unhappy this face is? Because you see, I started really last night looking at the body of the PowerWheel and then the body, well, the frame of the quad, and I was realizing that it was going to be very difficult. And then this morning, I tried to sit in the PowerWheel body with the idea of the motor being there, and it was not working. There was no way. My butt didn't even fit. Round 3. This is now the third PowerWheel that we are going to attempt. Again, the first one my kids stole from me. The second one, I just didn't fit in it. And now we have this one. So this one is a 2-seater, which is a way bigger upgrade than that 1-seater, the 1-seaters that I've had. This one, I can actually sit in. So my butt actually fits in it. Now, I still have some concerns, but I think this is the biggest I'm going to be able to go. And also, this came out of the budget because this one wasn't free. So this was $20. I can strip this one down, but I'm not going to show you that because I've already shown you me stripping down the other one, and that just doesn't make sense at this point. And I'm going to power wash it. But it's pink! Yeah! So, the other night I took off the carb, I cleaned it to the best of my abilities, and it would fire and then instantly die. So, after brainstorming a little bit, decided I would just buy a new carb and see if that gets me. So, we're going to try that now. Let's see what that does. Alright, my temporary gas tank leaked. Okay, whatever, that's fine. She started first pull. We are in business. This will be the motor that I'm going to use. We can start really doing something bad, but that did cost me $12 out of my budget. So I got the back axle flipped around so that the sprocket is not going to be on the right side. All I had to do was basically remove the back swing arm and flip everything upside down. That's going to work. I do have to move the shock tower, strut mount things. I figured I was going to do that to begin with. I think I'm going to lose my back brake. Not a big deal. I'll have front brakes. I'll have to probably fab some new chain guards and stuff on there. Not a big deal. The one thing though is now that I got the motor locked into place and sitting where I needed everything to sit, I realized that the motor sits a little far off to the one side. So when I was walking around, I was realizing that if I put the motor where I wanted it and where I wanted it, how far forward I wanted it, and centered it, and put it where I needed it to go, that I wouldn't be able to turn. The wheels were going to hit the ripcord area. So I had to slide the motor back 2 inches. So instead of ripping this frame down 6 inches like I originally planned on, I'm going to only be able to rip it down about 4 inches, which isn't that big of a deal. But I still seem 2 inches longer than what I wanted. So now it's really, there's a lot more cutting now to do, because now that I've got everything mocked in. Okay, I've got the rear strut remounted on there, and now it's time to shrink this thing down. Again, I'm going to remove 4 inches. So if you're wondering why I'm doing this if I'm not a good fabricator, it's because you never get good unless you screw stuff up. So my plan here is I'm cutting in different sections. I'm not just chopping it directly in half. I'm hoping that way when I put everything back together, because I'll have all those staggered joints, they'll be stronger. So I'm going to cut 4 inches out and use the Sawzall, because I think I cut a little straighter with that. Let's just cut it in half. I don't know what else to say. Alright, so obviously I'm not just going to stick this thing, butt these together and butt weld them together. I think that's the correct terminology, because I'm afraid it would still be weak. So this is the bottom part of the frame, this is the top part of the frame. Now luckily for me, this part slides in here pretty well. So I'm going to take the cut-offs that I just cut out, and then I'm going to slide and weld them in. And I think it's called a plug weld, is I'm going to drill a hole in both sides of the frame, slide this in, weld through the top, and then probably still do a bead of weld around here and then weld the whole thing back together. That's kind of the plan. Problem is that for the small pipe, I don't have an actual pipe that fits in there very nicely. I do have this old A-arm that came off of my son's quad that looks like it'll be close. So what I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to attempt to cut sections off. We'll go over, and for the first time ever, use my metal lathe and get this thing to where it slides inside there. Beginning to think that the biggest competitor on this actually isn't even the other builders at all. I think it's actually just the budget. So I got the engine in where I want it now that the frame has been shrank down, so I could see where everything was going to lie. And the big question was I going to have to buy more chain? Because this clutch is a 35 chain, the sprocket is a 40 chain. So I knew I was going to buy one or the other. I think that clutch is already fried, so I was going to have to order a new clutch. But if you order the clutch chain combo, it's a lot cheaper, so trying to figure that out. So I had to spend the money for a new chain and a new clutch, which was $35. Either way, I have like $19 left of my budget, so I really think the budget is the biggest competitor on this one. But ideally, I don't need anything else. Like I said, the motor is mocked into place. I found some scrap metal to make mounting plates. Once the motor is installed, I'll know a lot more. But alright, I got the new clutch on. Now we gotta figure out motor mounts for this. Now that I got the right clutch, I know where everything's supposed to sit. think it's somewhere back in here. And then I'm just going to use the old chain, remember I had to get more chain, to line this thing up and figure out where I need to get my motor mounts made. So ideally, to mount the motor, I would just kind of weld a solid plate right here, and then I could figure out where to go, drill holes, run bolts. I don't have the money for a solid plate that's going to be thick enough, so I'm just going to use angle iron. I have a couple pieces laying around. The problem is this far end bolt that goes through sits right over the frame. So plan is I will notch the angle iron around that, and then the bolt head that's going to stick on the bottom. I was going to cut that and weld. I don't know. I'm worried that might not be strong enough. So I'll keep the bolt head, and then I'll block up this over here, and then I'll just weld it all on there. There won't be much adjustment though once this is all welded. But I think that's what I'm going to do. So now that I've got the angle iron is all welded in there, I decided I'm going to just, bear with me on this, I'm going to just drill holes even through the frame to bolt the frame on. I did this on my mini bike before I knew better, and it was fine, so I'm going to assume that this will be fine the same way. If it's not, figure something else out. So I know I need to square up the engine on the frame, and I don't know how. So this is what I'm doing. I'm going to square, like a tape measure. All I'm doing is hitting to the bottom plate of the motor, and then just measuring to my square on both sides of the motor. And I'm at 71 millimeters, so I think I'm good. And then to drill the holes, I want to show you this one because it's kind of cool. So to know where I have to drill the holes, what I'm using is I cut this little itty bitty pencil, right? I'm just sticking the pencil in there. I'm just doing the swirly whirly whirly. Do that in all 4 holes. It should hopefully tell me where the holes need to be drilled. Okay, so the swirly pencil trick worked. It actually did write out where I need to drill my holes beautifully. Pencil swirly trick. You're welcome for that idea. So the motor is installed completely. She's nice and tight. The plate idea worked. The chain is now on. Gas tank probably going to eventually end up here. Not sure yet. But I had it mocked in so I could get the motor running, and that's when I found out that my tensioner was needed anyways. I think we're at the point where I need to start chopping up the body to see how it's going to fit. That way I'll know where I can run my exhaust, where I can run the gas tank, and all that stuff.